Every great nation needs a blueprint, right? A master plan. Well, today, we're going to decode one of the most massive, most intricate ones ever written. We're talking about the Constitution of India, the rule book for the world's largest democracy.
And just to give you a sense of the sheer scale we're talking about, look at this number, over 470 articles. To put that in perspective, the entire U.S. Constitution, it has just 7. 7! So yeah, this isn't just some dry legal document, it's an absolute epic, designed from the ground up to govern 1/6 of all humanity.
And you know what? That epic scale, totally intentional. It wasn't an accident. The folks who framed the Constitution, they knew exactly what they were building. Their official seal was an elephant. And what does that make you think of? It meant size, incredible strength, and wisdom, right? They were literally creating a document that was designed to be as vast and as diverse as the nation it was meant to serve. All right, so how on earth do we even begin to unpack this constitutional elephant? Well, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. First, where did all the ideas come from? Then we'll look at its unique design. After that, what does it actually guarantee its people? We'll also see how it stays alive and kicking. And finally, we'll dive into some of the criticisms it's faced over the years. Okay, first up, sourcing the materials. Where did the framers even get their ideas? Well, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, they basically went on a global shopping spree. They were looking for the absolute best constitutional features the world had to offer. And the chief architect himself, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, was completely 100% unapologetic about this. He actually said he had ransacked the world's constitutions. I love that word. See, for him, the goal wasn't originality just for the sake of it. It was about finding ideas that worked, proven ideas that could then be adapted to fit India's very unique situation. And wow, did they shop around. But they did it with a really clear purpose. For the basic structure of government, they looked to the UK's parliamentary system. Makes sense. But, and this is so important, for a huge diverse nation just born from a violent partition, they knew they needed to hold the country together. So, they looked to Canada's model for a strong central government. Then, for the rights of the people, they took inspiration from the U.S. Bill of Rights. For the ideals of social and economic justice, they looked to the USSR. And from Ireland, they picked up this really interesting idea of a moral compass for the state. So you see, they didn't just copy and paste. They curated, they picked, they chose, they engineered all these global ideas into something totally uniquely Indian. So, okay, they've got all these amazing parts from around the world. What did they actually build with them? Let's get into the core design, because it's all about creating this really unique and delicate balance of power. Okay, so usually governments fall into one of 2 buckets, right? You've got your federal systems, where power is shared between the center and the states, and then you have unitary systems, where all the power is concentrated at the top. The framers of India's constitution basically looked at both and said, why not have the best of both worlds? So what you get is a mix. It has classic federal features, separate governments for the center and states, but it also has these really strong unitary features, like a single constitution for everyone and a single citizenship. There's a great analogy for this. Think of it as a big brother, little brother setup. The states are like the little brothers. They've got their own powers, their own autonomy to do their thing. But the central government? That's the big brother. It's stronger, it has the final say on the really critical stuff. And if there's an emergency, it can step in and take full control. That's why this whole design is often called a federal system with a unitary bias. It leans towards the center. All right, the next brilliant balancing act they pulled off is this blend of being both rigid and flexible. Think about it. The Constitution had to be a solid, permanent foundation for the entire nation, right? But it also had to be adaptable enough to grow and change with the times. So how in the world did they pull that off? Well, they built in this really clever 3-tiered amendment process. So for some stuff, the more ordinary changes, all you need is a simple majority in Parliament. Easy. That's the flexible part. But for the more fundamental, core parts of the Constitution, you need what's called a special majority, a 2/3 vote. Much tougher. That's the rigid part. And then for the absolute most critical changes, the ones that affect the federal structure itself, you need that special majority plus you have to get the approval of at least half of all the state legislatures. It's just a masterful blend of stability and adaptability, all baked right into the system. Okay, so we've talked about the structure, the nuts and bolts of the government. But what's the whole point of it? Let's get to its ultimate purpose, the guarantees it makes to the people of India. Right at the very heart of the Constitution, you'll find the fundamental rights. Think of these as 6 core guarantees, an absolute shield that protects every single citizen from the power of the state. It doesn't matter who's in government, these rights ensure that every citizen has basic freedoms and protections. And, this is key, they are legally enforceable in a court of law. This is the shield given to every single Indian.
Okay, so if the fundamental rights are a shield, then the directive principles are more like a compass. They're basically a moral to-do list for every government that comes to power. But here's the crucial difference. Unlike your rights, you can't take the government to court if they don't follow these. And that was a very deliberate choice. The framers were realists. They knew that a newly independent, impoverished nation just couldn't immediately guarantee things like a uniform civil code or a living wage for everyone. So instead, they made these principles a fundamental guide, a set of instructions for building the kind of social and economic democracy they were dreaming of.
And then, to complete the whole picture, in 1976, something called fundamental duties were added. So think about it this way. Rights are what the country guarantees you. Directives are what the country aims for. And duties? That's what you, as a citizen, are morally expected to do for the country. Things like respecting the flag, promoting harmony, protecting the environment. It creates this beautiful balance between rights and responsibilities.
And all of this brings us to a really crucial point. The Indian Constitution was never meant to be some static document, frozen in time and collecting dust on a shelf. No way. It was designed from day one to be a living, breathing thing that could evolve right alongside the nation.
And boy, has it evolved. We're talking over 100 amendments so far. It has constantly adapted to new realities. You have the 42nd Amendment back in 1976, which was so massive people still call it a mini-constitution, and then jump all the way to 2023, and you get the 106th Amendment reserving seats for women in legislatures. It just goes to show you, this document is still changing, still trying to meet the social aspirations of a new era.
But of course, a document this big, this ambitious, it's going to have its critics. It's only natural. So let's be fair and take a look at some of the major criticisms that have been leveled against it, really since day one.
Probably the most common critique you hear is that it's just a bag of borrowings, that it's not really original. Others will tell you it's basically a carbon copy of the old British-era 1935 Act. Then there's the argument that its language is so complex and legalistic that it's a lawyer's paradise, completely inaccessible to the average person. And of course, its elephantine size comes up a lot, along with the idea that it feels a bit un-Indian or too westernized. But Dr. Ambedkar had a really powerful response to all of this. He basically argued, look, by the middle of the 20th century, the fundamental principles of a constitution weren't exactly a secret. They were already established around the world. The real innovation, he said, wasn't in inventing something totally new from scratch. It was in intelligently selecting the best ideas out there, correcting their known flaws, and then skillfully adapting them to the specific needs of India. So for him, the key word isn't borrowing, it's adaptation. And that really leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? Is this massive document just a patchwork quilt, a bag of borrowings, or is it a brilliant masterpiece of thoughtful adaptation, a unique blueprint that was perfectly tailored for the world's most diverse democracy? The answer, much like the Constitution itself, is incredibly complex, and it's a debate that's still very